Is it finally time for Julius Randle to get some time at the 5? Well, Tom Thibodeau seems to think so. So let's get into it and see if it's a good idea right now.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You could start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us a part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit that auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. And today I am going over Julius Randle at the 5. Finally, maybe, hopefully. We'll see. I'm waiting for Tibbs to put his money where his mouth is on this one, but his mouth is writing a check that it will hopefully cash here. So let's get into the quote first. So Tibbs recently did an interview with, I believe it was NBA.com. Some general questions about the season or whatever. How great is Jalen Brunson? Whatever, and he was like, Jalen Brunson's great, and it's like, cool. I didn't learn a ton there, but the interviewer did ask about how they would absorb the loss of Isaiah Hartenstein after, talking about Julius Randle a little bit. And maybe Tibbs was just feeling so effusive in his praise of Julius that he let this slip, or maybe this is something he's really thinking about. But he said, we went through that last year. When he says went through that, meaning like figuring out how to replace center depth thanks to injuries, whatever. And he said, we started the season where Mitchell was the starter and he was off to a monster start. When he went out, Jericho Sims started initially, then he got hurt. Then Isaiah came in and did what he did. But when he got hurt, Precious came in along with Taj Gibson. So we rotated guys to that position the entire year. We'll probably have to do it by committee. We'll look at some different things because we have versatility. We could see Julius more at the 5. Ding, 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 ding. Money quote. I don't want to do that for long stretches. It would take its toll. But to have him do it for 10 to 15 minutes, I think he can do it well. He also would create a lot of offensive advantages. So hopefully when Tibbs says, I don't want to do that for long stretches, maybe 10 to 15 minutes. Hopefully he doesn't mean 10 to 15 minutes total over the whole season. And in fact means 10 to 15 minutes per game. I don't think that is going to somehow break Julius's body down. If anything, it would make him play a little more ground bound. He might get beat up a little bit in the sense of, just being in the trenches more. But as we've seen over the years, Julius is in peak physical condition. And I don't really think that would matter too much. I think he's as strong as anyone in the league. And thanks to having a plus wingspan, he's able to hold up, with some of the smaller centers in the league. If you put him against Joel Embiid or Nikola Jokic for an entire game, yeah, maybe he gets, maybe that's a little less than ideal, but that is what you ultimately have Mitchell Robinson for. But I think strength-wise and whatever, he should be able to handle the rigors. And some of the numbers suggest from earlier in his career that, he did it quite a bit, and it even helped get him a contract on the Knicks. So, I don't really think it's out of the question that he could play the center position. But let's get into some of the numbers from the Knicks perspective first. I think when you say Julius at the 5, I don't necessarily think that means he has to be out there with like Josh Hart at the 4 or something like that. And maybe that is how the alignment that they'll run with once or twice. But, I think that ultimately you're probably looking at playing OG Anunoby out there at the 4 with Julius at the 5, if you're getting into the nitty gritty of what the positions would be. And I think that it would be, the idea behind that would basically be have OG cover the rim defense. So potentially even have OG guarding the opposing team's 5. Or them just kind of by committee, like if it's a really tough matchup, if it is like an Embiid of the world or something, maybe have Julius try to kind of keep him from backing down in the paint, and then OG help over to try to block a shot or just get a better contest up because of OG's length. He's got I think OG has like a 7'2" wingspan or something like that. It's pretty large on his 6'8" frame there. So, maybe you do something like that. I don't know what the exact answer would be, but I do think that if you have Julius out there at the 5, Tibbs is going to want some form of rim protection out there, or just some way of making sure that they're not going to bleed points in the paint, because that's kind of Tibbs's biggest pet peeve, I think, is giving up paint points. So there's like pretty little data to go off just from a Knicks perspective. But for 6 possessions in the playoffs, if you want to look at the OG part of the equation, Brunson, Deuce, Dante, Hart, and OG went for a plus 33.3 per 100 possessions in the playoffs for 6 possessions. So and take it for what it will. I believe that was in one game against Philly, if I'm not mistaken. And that was where we saw OG like actually guard up on Embiid for a minute and sort of fluster him, which is why the Knicks, ended with that plus 33.3 per 100 there. But also, there was some interesting data that it could show what could maybe work here just before OG arrived with the Knicks. So as far as Randall's concerned, the lineup of Jalen Brunson, Emmanuel Quickly, Josh Hart, RJ Barrett, and Julius Randle went for a plus 30 in 14 possessions together last year. That's plus 30 points. So basically, the Knicks scored 30 points per 100 possessions more than their opponents when those 5 were on the floor. But there's a little more data to back that one up too. So if you just go back 1 year to 2022 to 23, the lineup of Brunson, Quickly, Quentin Grimes, RJ, and Julius Randle. It's crazy how much this team has changed in a year and a half. But yeah, the lineup of Brunson, Quick, Grimes, RJ, and Randle went for 40 possessions. So they played 40 possessions together. I cannot for the life of me remember 40 possessions of that lineup together, but it is what it is. But that lineup was 51.4 points better per 100 possessions. So there's like some data that suggests that, with the personnel that the Knicks have, they might be able to make something work way better here with small ball. And, if you even go back to the 2021 to 22 season, there was that brief shining moment in the season opener where you had Julius Randle and Julius Randle and OB Toppin, a different 2-letter combo phonetically, OB Toppin, that played together for like, I don't know, I want to say it was a 10-minute stretch in that game or something, and looked awesome. And then Tibbs never went back to it for whatever reason. That was all just because like Mitchell Robinson had just come back that year. That was the year that Mitch was a little too beefed up and was still getting his conditioning back. And so, he was gassed at points in that game, and they wound up having to go to Julius and Obi a couple times, and it worked really good. I didn't even bother looking up the numbers. That one can exist on being anecdotal, I think, because it was so little. But there's Knicks evidence to show that Julius Randle at the 5 can work, and there's actually evidence as far as OG and Julius are concerned on their previous teams that can show that this could work as well. So I want to get into that in a second, as well as talk about some of the other stats with Julius that kind of make me believe a bit, and then I will try to. I decided to just do this live. I'm just going to talk through to end the show my thoughts on what lineups I think could potentially work, who I think Julius should be playing with, if Julius is at the 5, and what the Knicks might need to address throughout the season, if they want to make this thing really work. So talk about all that in just a second. But first, I got to let you all know about our good friends over at FanDuel. And hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And if you want a good opportunity, hey, Maybe you're not an NFL fan. Hey, this is a basketball podcast. Well, if that's the case, we are now less than a month away as of today from the Knicks opening game against the Boston Celtics. And the Knicks at a plus 5.5 if you bet the spread right now, or just if you bet them straight up to win, money line plus 180. I mean, why not? I don't know. I got a good feeling about that game. To open the season on Boston's home floor, I think the Knicks are going to come out with a chip on their shoulder. I mean, granted, it should be some pretty heavy hitting NBA action right away because both teams are returning most of their core players. Boston basically is the same team all over again. And the Knicks obviously have their entire core except for Isaiah Hartenstein, but plus Mikal Bridges now. It should be a pretty interesting matchup. But I really think the Knicks could end up winning it. And, hey, it gives you a little extra incentive to, want your team to win. So, again, if you place a $5 bet, you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. So getting more into this data with, Julius and OG and whatever, I wanted to kind of look back into their previous history with in the case of OG with Toronto a little bit, just get like a little idea of what he was up to last year. And then with Julius, I always want to go back to that 2018 and 19 Pelicans season because I feel like they utilized him in so many different ways than the Knicks have utilized him, where he was less of an ISO player there. He was more operating as a traditional big. And I understand that Julius has gotten way, way more skilled over the last number of years, and better handling the ball, better passing, better ISO scoring, everything. That all sort of took hold in the 2020 to 21 season and just got better from there, to the point where he's now a multi-time All NBA player, multi-time All Star, everything else, which is fantastic. But I wanted to look at that too. But first, let's just look at. So I just looked back last year to see if there was any good data with OG with the Raptors. And I I gotta say, like this lineup, I mean, again, small sample size alert, because we're just kind of piecing together what we can here. But 16 possessions OG played. They called him the 4 in this lineup, but I would say that you probably call him the 4 or the 5. But a lineup of Malachi Flynn, Gary Trent Jr., Grady Dick, Scotty Barnes, and OG Anunoby played for 16 possessions last year, and it was a plus 51.5 per 100 possessions, which is a crazy number. And when you consider the level of talent or lack thereof in that lineup, I mean, I like Gary Trent Jr. a lot, and I like Scotty Barnes well enough, but Malachi Flynn we saw on the Knicks, and I mean, I know that he went and dropped like one of those most random 50 burgers ever after leaving the Knicks. But I think that we can safely say at this point, not the highest level NBA player. And Grady Dick got better as the year went on, but certainly in the time that OG was there, that was kind of before he started breaking out. Like he had a pretty rough go of it to start last season. So the fact that that lineup was that good together, and I know that Scotty Barnes maybe a little lengthier than Julius Randle, maybe he's going to offer you a little more in the stocks department, but all in all, I think that's a pretty good like indicator of you might be able to get away with like if you did a Deuce, Dante, Hart, OG, and Julius Randle lineup. I think that would be pretty solid. Like it could certainly be, I think, better than a Malachi Flynn, Gary Trent Jr., Grady Dick, Scotty Barnes, and OG lineup. So that's one good indicator. And then, like I said, I wanted to go all the way back to the 2018 and 19 Pelicans, which crazy. You want to talk about like a wrinkle in time, just looking back on that team. I'm like, what was this team? It was such a bizarre amalgamation of talent with Drew Holiday, Anthony Davis, obviously there for part of the season before he asked his way out. Like Julius was there, and just crazy, different world. It's crazy how quickly the NBA turns over. But so there was a number of lineups I think with Julius out there at the 5, with various casts of characters, and I think it was kind of a mixed bag as far as what worked and what didn't. The talent level on that team, outside of like Anthony Davis, Drew Holiday, and then Julius, who had his like breakout year there, was not exactly the highest. They were still playing Alfred Payton a decent amount. There was like I think I saw oh my god, I'm forgetting some of the names already, but there was some names where I was looking and I was like, I can't believe that that guy was in the league, or I don't even necessarily know who this person was. So I guess that kind of underscores it. But lineups with Julius and in another time capsule, Julius and Nikola Mirotic were generally pretty successful. So I went on Cleaning the Glass to find most of these lineup data numbers, and so it was a little hard to like distill it all down and be like, hey, this two-man combo. Probably could have gone to NBA.com for this, but whatever. They have two-man combo data and stuff that you can look up, but I just guesstimated. It was pretty cut and dry, I think. But they played probably about 300 possessions together and averaged out to around like plus 7 or 8 points per 100 possessions higher than opponents. So that's actually like a really good sample size. And Mirotic is not necessarily the strongest rebounder or rim protector. So Julius definitely was out there kind of carrying the load in that capacity, and apparently it worked for them. And I think a lot of those lineups they had Drew Holiday out there too, which helps from a perimeter defense perspective and all that to make life easier on the guy on the inside. But the Knicks are in sort of a unique position where they can offer that to him. I mean, they could potentially throw a lineup out there that would be like Deuce McBride, Mikal Bridges, uh, Josh Hart, we'll say at the three to help with the rebounding load a little bit, and then OG and Julius, and that's a lot of perimeter defense, and hopefully that goes a long way towards not taxing Julius if he has to be out there as the five, as far as like the defensive end, and that I think would be the greatest opportunity for the Knicks to get exposed with one of these small lineups. So the fact that he was out there with Mirotic, who doesn't offer nearly what OG would be able to offer on the defensive end, and they still made it work, is pretty encouraging, I think. He also played some time with like a younger, greener Christian Wood at the four. So that was, I mean, Christian Wood had not had his pseudo breakout yet. I think I want to say that the year that that really happened was like 2020 to 21, but he played with Christian Wood at the four a little bit. And, there was limited samples of that too, but one of the lineups I think was not a positive, but like two or three lineups where he played a handful of possessions with Christian Wood were pretty significantly positive. And again, that was, a much younger Christian Wood who hadn't figured things out yet. But I think that he offers sort of a similar vibe in terms of what he could give you as far as like rim protection and stuff that an OG Anunoby does. So maybe a good bellwether there of what could potentially happen with Julius here. But looking further into Julius's stats, when he was with the Pelicans, this one I've always come back to, and it's tough for me to believe that the Knicks have never really utilized this, but Julius was 92nd percentile as a pick and roll man in points per possession in 2018 and 19 with New Orleans. He averaged 1.34 points per possession and had a 66% scoring frequency, both of which are really good numbers, especially the 1.34 points per possession. I mean, anytime you're over 1 point per possession, I think that's generally considered pretty favorable. I think the leader in this category had about 1.5. And so for Julius to be at a 1.34, like maybe that's the way that you absorb some of the loss of Isaiah Hartenstein, because I don't know that they have anyone that's going to be able to do what Hartenstein did as far as passing out of the short roll, having, a floater game, which for Julius maybe is like a pull up midi or something like that, at the free throw line. I think that would probably be his answer to that. Julius hasn't really showed off a floater before, or he could just get all the way to the hoop and just straight up finish as a roll man. But, he offers, I think, a lot there that could replicate a little bit what Isaiah Hartenstein did. The fact that even that they're both lefties would mean that they could sort of occupy the same areas of the floor, just like what, Hartenstein occupied when he was out there with Jalen Brunson or whoever. I think maybe using Julius as a roll man could be useful. And, he's shown, it was 5 years ago now, but he's shown that he can do it, that he can go out there and finish as a roll man and finish strong. And he's gotten, I think, only better in his time with the Knicks as far as getting all the way to the rim, drawing fouls, stuff like that. So maybe that's a good way to get Julius involved with the bench unit, get the bench unit involved with Julius as well, or even just do it with mostly the starters out there, but just sit Mitch down and then, maybe you sub in Dante DiVincenzo, and you could have a lineup of like Jalen Brunson, Dante DiVincenzo, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Julius Randle. I don't think you're needy for anything there as far as defense is concerned. Rebounding, I think you're okay. If you're really struggling for rebounds or whatever, maybe throw Josh Hart out there instead of Dante. And then you've got defense, all over the place. You've got the scoring with Jalen Brunson. You could potentially start running the pick and roll with Julius. There's just so many different options out there for how to make this work. And you know what? Let's just go through some of those. I want to just kind of live go through the roster and just start trying to piece together some lineups and just theorize about what those could look like. So I'm going to do that in just a moment here. But first, I got to let you know about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So let's talk about what lineups could potentially work with Julius Randle at the 5. And I think I've made it pretty obvious. I think the best combination is Julius at the 5 and OG Anunoby at the 4, quote unquote. You can call it however you want. Maybe you say that technically OG is the 5 there, if whatever you consider to be the hallmark skill of the big or whatever. Is it the rebounding? Is it the keeping the guy out of the paint? Or is it the rim protection and the all that, whatever? It doesn't really matter. Positionless basketball, right? Like I find it funny how many basketball discussions circle around position and what position a guy is playing when everybody's also been trying to say for years like basketball is positionless. You just have to have good players out there. Well, whatever. I think the best alignment is OG and Julius out there at the 4-5, however you want to say who is what there. And the beauty of this roster outside of that is I think you've got a lot of potential. Obviously, I think the best lineups are going to feature Jalen Brunson at the 1. I think that you're probably going to want to, have Mikal Bridges out there when you can. I think that it makes a lot of sense to have Bridges out there as uh, the perimeter defender guy. If you're going to have OG out there and be tasking him with potentially providing that rim defense for, as Tibbs said, 10 to 15 minutes a game. I think that that's sort of the way you want to go. Potentially have Mikal Bridges out there, gives you that extra scoring punch if you need it. He's capable of just hitting threes if you want him to do that. He's capable of putting it on the deck. He could be capable potentially of running a quick little pick and roll with Julius Randle or something like that, or just breaking the defense down, kicking it out to OG in the corner. I mean, I think the one thing that's pretty brilliant about that 4-man combo, and let's just throw, I think Dante would be the guy to put out there that would make a potential like Knicks death lineup here. If you want to harken back to true positionless basketball, those Golden State Warriors teams with the death lineup, I think that's about as close as you're going to get, because then you're looking at, I mean, even with those Golden State teams, you were always sort of dealing with uh, this sort of flaw that like Draymond Green was not the best 3-point shooter. So they couldn't actually really play like a perfect 5 out with that team, even though they played damn near perfect basketball. But they couldn't quite play a 5 out. They could do like 4 out, where they would do, Steph and Klay Thompson and Andre Iguodala, Kevin Durant, and or Harrison Barnes, depending on what era you're talking about, and Draymond Green at the 5. I think that you could replicate something really similar with the Knicks and potentially better, because I think Julius Randle at this point in his career more skilled as a scorer than Draymond Green has ever been in his career. Better shooter, than Draymond Green has ever been, I think. And, people go back and forth on Julius Randle shooting. Last year's numbers, I think, they would have been a lot better on the overall had Julius not gotten hurt, because he just started so phenomenally cold. And then he got really hot. And especially in the OG era, he was shooting way better. I think if he had the whole season, he would have been able to shoot 35, 36% from three by the end of the year, which would have been perfectly fine. Instead, he ended at 32% or whatever it was, because his season got cut short. But, OG is a almost 40% three-point shooter. Mikhail can be an almost 40% three-point shooter, especially with less load on him, as a creator and as a 1A like superstar type. Brunson is a 40% three-point shooter. Dante is a 40% three-point shooter. So if your worst three-point shooter out there is a 35, 36% guy in Julius Randle, like, you're doing really good. That's a really nasty lineup on offense. And I don't think that they're giving up so much on defense that, that would be an issue. If you play that lineup for 10, 15 minutes a game, you're gonna run some teams off the floor. I think you're gonna have a lot of success with that lineup. But even the beauty of this team is that you can sub different guys in for different needs. If you need a little more defense, you could throw Deuce McBride out there instead of Dante DiVincenzo in that lineup. Now you've got Deuce and Mikal Bridges working the perimeter, Jalen Brunson getting his hand in there, and batting passes away, which is something he's really good at. And so you can have the top two perimeter players on any given team handled by Deuce and Bridges. And then you've got OG still on the inside, Julius Randle still there to gobble up rebounds, and Brunson, can kind of hide on whoever the guy 1 to 3 that you don't want your best defender on. He can hide on that guy, play the, passing lanes, ball hawk a bit. And you've got a really nasty defensive lineup that just the only thing it lacks in is just pure size on the inside, but isn't really lacking for anything else. And, would probably have enough hands and limbs out there to prevent a ball from getting to a Joel Embiid type anyway, just by virtue of good help defense and, good defensive instincts. But, maybe you need more rebounding or something as well. Well, then you could still have Dante out there at the 2, and then you could sub Bridges out for Josh Hart, for example, who's going to give you tons more rebounding and give you that secondary presence behind Julius, and also, help you in transition, let you still play fast with that small lineup. And I think that he would just be a fantastic addition to that lineup as well. And then, even if it comes down to it, and like if you have Jalen sitting down, you could have Deuce McBride out there with Dante and, either Hart or Bridges. And I think you'd be all right too, because Julius gives you that ball handling. It could be, you want to talk about, or well, I'm the only one who's invoked him, but if you talk about Draymond Green, that type, where part of what made those lineups work was that Draymond Green as the 5 could bring the ball down sometimes. Julius can definitely do that in arrangements that don't involve Jalen Brunson. So I think that that's a possibility too. I think that Tibbs needs to explore this finally. I think that this could actually be the thing that it takes the Knicks from, are they pretenders or contenders? You know what I mean? Like, are they a team that is going to stay a little too rigid and not be able to figure out that one secret sauce item that turns them into a championship team? Or do they figure out that thing and become a championship team? I'm not saying that playing Julius at the 5 for 10 to 15 minutes a game guarantees you a championship or something, but I think it puts you more in that conversation. It makes the Knicks more versatile. It makes them more dangerous. It makes them more unpredictable in any given, any given game, any given moment. If Tibbs throws that lineup out there, teams are going to scramble, because it's very different from like a Mitchell Robinson alignment, or even just how they play with Precious Achiuwa out there as the backup center. Certainly how they play with Jericho Sims out there. So I think it's definitely something the Knicks need to explore, and hopefully they will. And we'll see as the preseason gets going in a few weeks, if that's something that they're really interested in checking out and getting a look there. And I feel like Tibbs runs preseason games like a dress rehearsal for the regular season. So if we see some of that early, I think that would be a pretty good indicator that that's something on his mind going into the regular season. But at any rate, we'll see when we get there, and we'll have more great shows coming for you guys. We got more previews coming up. Gavin's coming back in the next day or so. So I think maybe as soon as tomorrow or the next day, we'll have episodes up together again, which would be great. But yeah, until next time, thank you all for listening today, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace out, everybody.